Steve here, and talking not about a film, but about going to the movies. But not going to the movies at the movies, going to the movies at home, or maybe even not at home. Maybe even just go to the movies on your screen. Maybe you're on the tram or the train, and you're watching a film, an Australian film. Talking about watching Australian films away from the cinema. Where do you watch them and how do you watch them? There's no doubt that it is becoming increasingly difficult to watch Australian movies at the cinemas because a lot of cinemas don't have a lot of faith, times, or patience for local films. When they do play them, they might only play them for 7 days and then they're gone and they're very hard to see. So, seeing Australian films is a necessity, really, to watch them away from the cinema. And the question that I have to you all is, how are you watching Australian films away from the cinema? Are you watching it on your own TV at home or your own screens at home? And how are you doing that? And are you having popcorn? And I will get to food at the cinema, because food at the cinema, of course, has become a mega industry. Village Roadshow, 70% of their revenue is through the candy bar. So are you going to the movies and not buying anything at the candy bar? And if you are one of those people, my hat is off to you for doing that. I was at Gold Class and I didn't order any food, which apparently is quite offensive for the cinema. And during the screening, one of the ushers just kept coming up and asking me if I wanted to order something. The answer was no, as it was at the start. Little bit annoying. That was Interstellar, Christopher Nolan. Good film. Annoying stuff. All right, now today I want to talk about Over the Top. That's OTT. And this, Over the Top, is over the top, bypassing the cinema. And when I talk about the cinema today, ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking about the physical space. I'm not talking about films necessarily, which can be considered like Australian cinema, for instance. You could theoretically do a whole course, a whole book, a whole lecture series on the movies themselves without even talking about the experience of going to the movies and watching them at the movies. I increasingly try and talk about my own experience of watching films at the cinema, because I think it is a very different experience watching films at the cinema. If you go to the cinema to watch a film, do you know you're 80% more likely to remember that film? This is something about the cinema, I think, where you are required to put away your little screen and absorb yourself in the big screen. Now, Over the Top is a means of providing television and film content over the internet at the request and to suit the requirements of the individual consumer. Now, the term itself stands for over the top, which implies that a content provider is going over the top of existing internet services and also internet cinemas. So this is over the top is when you can pinpoint the film you want. It's not basically a curation. There are some services which provide a curation where you can pick, a few films. This is actually when you want a film in the world and you are able to go into the world of the internet to find it. What I find more intriguing is we now have more access to films than we ever have. Right? We have more access to films from all over the world, different countries, Australia, India, Vietnam, new films, old films, silent films, all of them, right? We have more access to all of that than ever before. Yet, ironically, we are spending more and more time watching the same sort of film, or the same film literally over and over and over again. we seem less curious to try different films and watch different films now than ever before. And I think that's quite depressing, to be honest. I do. Now, over-the-top video viewers, individuals who watch video via any app or website that provides streaming video content and bypasses traditional distribution. Right? Examples would be your Netflix Premiere or the HBO, or films that you can watch on a streaming service, but you can't actually go to the movies to watch. There's a whole new thing going on there. There's a bit of argy-bargy with the theatrical industry. Makes sense. It is their industry, as far as trying to entice people to the cinema. And if there's a film that is only on Netflix, even if the cinema chains would want to play that film, right? Often they can't, because Netflix or HBO or whoever won't let them. So it's a big problem. It's a big problem with the Academy Awards. Some films are now playing because of the Academy Awards requirement, but I will get to that momentarily. What does it mean to consider Netflix as cinema? Do you consider Netflix as cinema? That's an interesting question. It's an interesting piece of research by Diane Burgess and Kirsten Stevens. That's the prescribed reading for this week. Taking Netflix to the cinema, national cinema value chain disruptions in the age of streaming. Interesting title, interesting article. I highly recommend you give it a read. Now, the Academy Awards for Best Picture category doesn't consider Netflix as cinema. No, saying if it's not playing in the theatres, we're not putting it in our category for Best Picture. Don't care. Don't care who directed it. Don't care. Not putting it in. So they've doubled down, and they've even made their requirements to be nominated for Best Picture even more stringent. Expanded theatrical run of 7 days, consecutive or non-consecutive, in 10 of the top 50 US markets, no later than 45 days after the initial release. Right? So there was talk that they would ease their requirements and that Netflix and other streaming services wouldn't have to put their films in the cinema. And the Academy Awards have come back after, I guess, talking to Tom Cruise. He's a big fan of the cinema. He does not like films premiering on streaming. No siree, Bob. Does he like that at all? He's a big fan of the movies. So anyway, you're not going to see Tom Cruise sitting at home watching Netflix. He's going to be at the cinema supporting films at the cinema. But anyway, the Academy Awards will not change their view and their stance on this. So if you're a streaming service and you want the prestige of Academy Award nominations, just for Best Picture, I should say, folks, this isn't for other categories, it's just for Best Picture. But who cares about the other categories, let's be honest. Everyone just cares about the Best Picture. That's all we care about. Watched the Academies last night. Who won Best Picture? That's what we're talking about. Or, of course, Will Smith slapping other actors when they make jokes about his wife. We talk about that as well, if that happens at the Academy Awards. Anyway, Netflix, basically there is a clear distinction of Netflix as cinema when it comes to the Academy Awards. And what do you think about that? Should films that play on Netflix and only on Netflix and via that platform, should they be allowed to be nominated for Best Picture? There is something about it being democratic, right? Like, what if you actually don't have Netflix? Like, should you be denied to see that film? You know, when a film comes out, it generally plays at numerous cinemas in numerous chains. So, you know, not like Hoyts don't have exclusive rights to, say, Mission Impossible or Barbie, films like that. Something to think about. Now, you can see the la-di-da slides have been the content hasn't been produced, but the visualization has been done through AI. That's right. Well, they asked me if I'm happy for my slides to be put into these picture things, and I said, yeah, sure, go for it. So thanks, AI, for making very dull text stimulating to the eye. Now, there appears to be two issues that impact the perception that Netflix is not cinema. Right. Perception number one. Right. Much of the existing coverage of digital distribution has come from outside the discipline of film studies. So I have to blame myself here. So the reason why Netflix isn't considered as cinema is because of me, because of people like me, old dinosaurs who think, very snooty approaches to Netflix. So it can't be cinema, all of that, because it's on the TV. And you go to the cinema, that's a physical space and place. So that's the first reason why Netflix isn't considered a cinema. A second issue arises from the apparent agreement that Netflix is more closely aligned with television because it's on your TV or mobile device, and that is where you watch, TV, if that makes sense. Traditional TV, on your TV. Netflix is not at the cinema, for instance. That'd be interesting, wouldn't it? If you could go to the cinema and watch Netflix. Who would get to control the remote? Such questions will be pondered at another time. Now, researchers, I suppose this is more part of your point one, who bring a film studies perspective to the study of on-demand digital distribution, largely focus on platforms like Mubi. It's a British streaming service, which is good because they curate films. So they basically, new film every day, and the films only last for 30 days. That makes sense. So you've only got a selection of 30 films at any given time, which is good. It's not overwhelming, Mubi, even though they did change it, and now they've sort of released all of their archive onto Mubi, which makes it a bit more overwhelming. So there's still the 30-day cycle, but then you can pick all these other films, which is a bit, like I said, overwhelming, but also great because they do have some good stuff in their archive. I watched the other day Martin Scorsese's The King of Comedy, which I hadn't seen for a few years. Great film. Arguably, De Niro's great performance. Could be arguably Scorsese's great film as well, but I won't get into that right here. So basically, people like me are either talking about Netflix as not being cinema, or if we are talking about streaming services, we're talking about nerdy cinema streaming services like Mubi or the Criterion Channel, which I've just subscribed to, which is fantastic. So I guess I'm not defeating my own argument. I'm proving the case that people like me are not considering Netflix as cinema. But I am not one of those people that don't consider Netflix as cinema. I think Netflix should be considered, at least in the conversation, as cinema. And some great films have been premiered on Netflix. Now, Netflix as cinema dismisses the social experience of the traditional cinema space by reconsidering the home cinema as an important place for movie watching. All right. Now, before COVID, and I suppose this is the COVID lecture, folks. Before COVID, I think this conversation was a bit different, but COVID changed everything, didn't it? And everything sort of became within the house, or within 5Ks within the house. And now we do, I think, consider Netflix far more important than we may have in the previous COVID world. Do you generally watch Netflix movies at home? Alone? With friends? How do you watch Netflix? Do you watch Netflix in a way that is different to going to the movies? Do you go to the movies by yourself? Do you watch Netflix at home by yourself? You may think, no, I don't go to the movies by myself, but I do watch Netflix at home by myself. Is there a difference in that? I'll get to that soon, about the social experience of watching a movie. Netflix has the potential of circulating Australian films to a wide global audience, right? So, Australian film goes on Netflix. No, I'll use a different approach to this. Australian film goes to the cinema. 10 people see it, stays for a week at the cinema. The cinema manager thinks, well, no one's going to see this Australian film. I'll get rid of it. I'll put Top Gun in all the cinemas. Get rid of the Australian film. It goes on Netflix, all right, and instantly everybody with a Netflix account in the world has access to this Australian film. This could be an opportunity for an Australian film, a small indie Australian film, to reach wide global audiences. Such an example is The Stranger, which is a great gritty Australian true crime film. Highly recommend it. I won't say anything because if I say anything, I'll probably be ruining the film for you. But very good, very good. Tense, very intense. Now, The Stranger has attracted a global audience in the tens of millions on Netflix. Tick, tick, tick. However, the problem of Netflix, right, is Netflix are kind of like, they throw a lot of things at the dart chart. So what they do is they buy a bunch of films, not really sure if any of them are going to be successful. And then they decide at a later date the films that they want to actually foreground and put forward and, connect to their algorithms and all of those sorts of things. So there are tons and tons of Australian films on Netflix where you literally can only find them by typing in the title of that film, which is very disappointing because then those films are just gone and lost because the producers can't do anything else with those films. So there is a risk in signing your film off to something like Netflix. Now, when you're on Netflix or other streaming services, do you look for Australian movies? Is that something that attracts you? Do you look for Australian movies? Do you pick streaming platforms because of Australian movies? A Stan would be a good example of a platform that does focus on Australian content and, of course, SBS On Demand. The best streaming service, I think, around. I think it's excellent, SBS On Demand. Good selection of Australian movies on that. Or is that not something you're really looking for when you're on the streaming services? And is this denying us of Australian movies? Should there be some sort of quota to see Australian films? Now, speaking of quotas, from mid-2024, the federal government will require the major streaming platforms to put some of their revenue back into Australian content. Now, major streaming services will be required to invest revenue into producing local content from mid-2024. All right? So Netflix basically will have to funnel a whole bunch of money back into producing local films, with the idea that those local films would then appear on Netflix. It's a bit problematic, this argument, I must say. The film and TV sector has previously argued for 20% of revenue to be put into local productions, right? That's not going to happen. I mean, I'd like it to happen, but it's not going to happen. While streaming services already produce Australian content, the Arts Minister says it should be a requirement. Right now, at the time of recording this, all of this hasn't. It's just a conversation, really. Nothing has been confirmed or carved into stone, which is a bit concerning, considering all of this was announced January 2023. These rules would also bring the streaming sector into line with free-to-air networks. Again, right? When I was talking before, why is Netflix considered TV? Because people consider it TV because it's on TV, and also ministers are making direct comparisons to free-to-air TV with streaming services, saying, well, you are kind of like TV, like free-to-air's TV. So let's, if you want to be TV, then you can play by the rules of the free-to-air networks. Even though the streaming services are saying, oh, but we're not free-to-air. No, we're not. We're our own thing, which is not free-to-air. We're cinema at home on your mobile phone. The streaming sector, fun fact, is already a significant producer of Australian screen content, spending more than, drum roll, pause for effect, 330 million on the local industry in 2021 to 2022. More recent figures haven't been released. That's a lot of money, isn't it? 330 million. Well, it's probably one Baz Luhrmann film, let's be honest. But still, it's better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick, as my mum would say. Okay, now I just want to talk about some stats for you. How we're watching films on the internet or streaming services. Attitudes towards paying for Australian content. 1 in 4 video on demand users would pay for more exclusive Australian content. With only limited local content currently available on Australian services, we were keen to gauge if there would be an appetite for more Australian programs on these services if it came at additional cost. Would you pay more if, so you could pay for Netflix, say it's $16 a month, right? Or you could pay $21 and you get heaps of Australian films. Whole section, Australian films, whole category. Would you pay for it? Would you really? Would you really pay for it? While 60% of video on demand users expect to pay the same for Australian overseas content, around 1 in 4 video on demand users would be prepared to pay more for subscriptions if they offered more or exclusive Australian content. Are you the 1 in 4? Are you? Are you really? Be honest. Are you the 1 in 4? But perhaps of most interest is the attitudes of non-subscription video on demand users, which shows that 1 in 5 would be interested in subscription services if they featured more Australian content. Interesting. Let's unpack those ideas in the classroom. What holds us back from watching more online? We want faster internet. It's cheaper online, so we watch more online. Is that true? It is expensive to go to the movies. I mean, I'm not going to kid you. You get your ticket. What's that? $25, $20? Generally. If you go to the candy bar, good night. Good night. If you go to the candy bar. There's more available online, people are saying. That's why they watch things online. Yeah, but are you being diverse and risky when you're watching things online? Think about that. Because it's actually hard to if you're just going through Netflix, there's a bit of foreign stuff. There's not a lot. And old stuff, oh, forget about it. It's really hard to find old stuff. I was watching One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest the other night, which I saw on Netflix. Good film. It's old. Still American though. I'm kind of defending my own point here. Ability to watch on my own TV screen is a big reason why we're watching more online. Knowing where to go to find content I'm interested in is also another. So there you go. That's why people are watching more online. But everybody wants faster internet. I was in Singapore, and let me tell you, they have really fast internet. It's they put Australia to shame with our internet. So if you want faster internet, Singapore, that's your place right there. Excellent internet. Recommend the internet. And the food, good food. Good food, good internet. It's clean, easy to get around. By and large, everybody's pretty polite. Singapore, highly recommended. Who and what influences content discovery and choice? Now, this is an interesting one. I'll be interested to hear what you have to say about this one. All right, so what is persuading your choice for watching video on demand? The main one, talking to friends or family. So friends are the major influences of what you watch. And if your friends are recommending bad stuff, then clearly you need better friends. I mean, I'm just going to put it out there. Your friends have one obligation, and that's to be recommending good stuff to watch. And if they're recommending you crap, then what sort of friend are they really? So that's talking directly to friends and family, right? The second biggest reason of what influences you are friends and family via social emails and messages. That's them texting you. Hey man, you got to see The Stranger, Joel Edgerton, real cool Australian film on Netflix. Check it out. That sort of stuff. Third one surprises me: professional news reviews. It surprises me because there are no really film reviewers anymore. If anyone has aspirations that you want to be a film reviewer, I commend your aspiration, but it's going to be a hard road because there aren't many around. But hey, maybe what we need are more and more people wanting to be film reviewers, and if more people do it, maybe the industry will come back. Where does the film reviewer survive anymore? As most newspapers have stopped their film reviewing. Most radio has stopped their film reviewing. Anyway, different conversation, different day. Online ads are still quite popular in influencing you, and of course social media and other things. And Letterboxd, I think, is also quite popular at the moment with people. Now, what drives you to watch video on demand? Watch at a time suitable to me. All right, you don't want to sit and wait. It is annoying going to the cinema, I'll be honest with you. I mean, it's a 2:10 screening. Okay, 2:10 screening. So you get there at 2:10. You've made sure you parked. You got your popcorn. You're doing all that. It's 2:10. You might even get there 2:15. You go, well, it's not going to start on time. And the film starts at 2:30 or something. It's ridiculous. You're just sitting there watching ads and trailers and all this. But in the UK, can I just say, I was out Oxford Way a couple of years ago. Now, you were waiting a long time for that film to start. A long time. I'm talking 40, 45 minutes before the film starts. It's ridiculous. Crazy. You missed the film at a scheduled time, so you want to watch it. That's why you're watching it. It's free. It is true. You could watch, say, ABC iView, free platform. You could watch a film on that for free, and pretty good content there. They could do a bit better with their films, their choice of films. Watch what I want. It's my choice. That's the fourth biggest reason of what drives you to watch it. All right. I think that your choice is good, but it's always interesting when somebody gifts you a selection, a curation of films. That excites me. Well, I like things like the Melbourne Cinematheque, where you've got experts in world cinema and they have chosen particular films for you to watch. They're often films that you've never seen. And you go and you watch them and you think, yeah, thanks. That was good. I enjoyed that. There used to be a show on SBS on Friday nights called, I think it was called Eat Carpet. And they would just play really crazy stuff from around the world, crazy Japanese films and independent American films. And that just changed my whole life when I was young, at that formative age. I think that we need to be more risky when we watch it. Or maybe we don't. Maybe I'm out of touch here. There's no ads when you're watching it on video on demand. Well, there is ads. I mean, let's face it. When Foxtel started in Australia, there's going to be no ads. None of these ads. It's cheaper than the cinema. That's true. That is true. Now you can binge watch. That's another big one. Yeah. So these are some of the reasons why people are watching video on demand. Okay, so now some final thoughts with a good bowl of popcorn and a remote. I'll get to the food momentarily. Where do you watch Australian films? Talk to me about it. I want to know. I want to know where you're watching Australian films. Are you watching Australian films? Would you pay to see an Australian film because it's Australian? Right? There's this film on iView, it's American, but there's an Australian film, and you got to pay for it. Would you pay for it? Would you pay for it? Would you go to the cinema to pay for an Australian film, or would you only watch Australian films streaming? Are you aware of streaming platforms that provide better content of Australian films? So would you go Stan because they've got better content than Netflix? Through streaming, do you feel you watch many, any, or enough Australian films? I don't feel I watch enough Australian films. And I research and teach Australian cinema. That's how hard it is to watch Australian films. Do you think it's important to watch Australian films? Is it good for the soul? Is it good for your soul? Are you enriched in your soul when you watch an Australian film? And do you seek out Australian films? If you go to something like Film Festival, Melbourne International Film Festival, are you looking for Australian films? Now, the big one. When you're at home, do you snack when watching films at home? Right. Are your snacks different than at the cinema? Is part of the appeal of going to the cinema the popcorn or the choc top? Boysenberry choc top, right? If you are at a Palace cinema, the Boysenberry choc top is delightful. Absolutely delightful, right? Go down there, get yourself a boysenberry choc top. I don't care how bad the film is, you're going to have a good time because that boysenberry choc top is worth the price of your cinema ticket, even though you don't get the choc top as part of the cinema ticket. That would be good, wouldn't it? If you paid $25 and you got to see the movie at the cinema and a boysenberry choc top. But are the movie snacks part of the appeal of going to the movies? And are there particular movie snacks that you only get at the cinema? The Palace cinemas, all of them make their own choc tops in-house, on site. Did you know that? That's true. Anyway, that's my final thoughts on watching Australian movies at the cinemas. I'll be interested to talk through all of these points with you. It's quite interesting when you start to think about platforms, what role they play, and what need we have for them, and what appetite, pardon the pun, there is for Australian movies and choc tops on streaming services. And with that, I will say see you later, and I won't say I'll see you at the cinema. I'll say I'll see you connected together through watching something on streaming, and then we can text each other and tell each other how grouse it was. All right, and with that, I will say bye for now.